just one that's recent is, learning that I was accepted to seminary was very good news. Coming from a non-traditional educational background, it wasn't a given that I would be admitted. So getting that was it was literally like a phone call delivering, the news, which was very good. So it was like a moment that I can think of where it was like, wow, great. Like that was good.
That phone call literally determined at least what the next 3 or 4 years of your life looks like, and probably opens doors to so many other options, which may or may not include diesel mechanic repairs.
Another one was with my thyroid disease, when I had heard that it was like going into remission. That was very good news.
And then from then till now, you also find out about seminary, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So it's been a good year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. They both happened, within 14 months or so.
We've done a lot of background and we've gone on a few rabbit trails. How would you describe or define the good news of the kingdom from Jesus' perspective? What is the gospel or the good news of the kingdom?
Yeah, I think part of the good news that Jesus describes, that Paul later kind of fleshes out, is that we are able to be reconciled to God. Part of that role is through Christ. We are reconciled to God in a way that we haven't been previously, particularly in the Gentile world. So that's, I think, a core component of the good news is reconciliation.
So flesh that out. Reconciliation is you were separated from, and then now you're reunited to or brought back together again towards.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of brought back into right relationship.
Okay.
Removal of barriers or obstacles.
Okay. And what are the obstacles? What are the barriers or obstacles that have separated people from God?
Just the things that we do that are against God's intention for us as individuals, against God's intention for society and relationships with other people.
Sort of reconciliation from multiple layers. It's not just.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about we are reconciled to God. And then now, because of that, we are in the ministry of reconciliation. And so we play a role in reconciling others to Christ.
Okay.
Because of where we came from.
Okay. How does a person know if they've been reconciled? Is it an emotional thing? Is it a sort of a shift in your soul where you feel a connection where you perhaps didn't before? Is it more of a theological or doctrinal change?
How does one know? I think it varies. I think that's a question that's been asked for a long time. I think some people, have an experience where they are, whether it's described as like a baptism of the Spirit, where there's this definitive moment where something changes. They have an experience where they are connected with God, and like afterwards they are different. That sometimes that's how like people know.
And it usually involves some sort of a messy before and after process, which is an unfortunate side effect. You're a church kid. You grew up in a Lutheran church. I imagine you were baptized and confirmed. And if they did it right, you've been in the whole time. You just more confirmed or finalized or stepping into in greater ways the reality of this reconciliation. For you, was it not a black and white emotional experience? And I'm not saying it should be. That's not where I'm trying to come from.
I think mine was a bit of a mixture. I think kind of the other side of that, I think entering into relationship is a conscious decision. It is by being in relationship with Jesus, I believe we are reconciled, or at least on the process of reconciliation. So maybe that's the most basic thing that I think I could say I believe is if you're in relationship with Christ, you are on the road of reconciliation.
Okay. And that's a term that's thrown out a lot. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Sure.
So is that similar to human relationships? How does somebody actually have functionally a relationship with someone that's unseen?
The way I'm using it, I think, has to do with a commitment level to that person. if I'm in relationship with this person as my friend, then I'm, committed to be their friend, by engaging in conversation, spending time, doing activities, and a certain level of serving the needs of that person. So I
Okay.
think when it comes to Christ, what I mean by relationship is, it demands a living out of the obedience to what Jesus taught.
Hmm.
It requires a level of commitment, and that commitment level changes. For some people, it's might be very, very dramatic. For some people, maybe it's like it's the beginning. But there's a level
Progressive.
of, I'm
Hmm.
choosing to follow this person, this
Hmm.
being. And to follow that person then means to see what they said about how we ought to live our lives, and then to kind
Hmm.
of bring our lives into obedience of that way of living.
Hmm. Imitation.
Mhm.
Okay. Personally, what do you find the most challenging uh, when it comes to imitation of Christ? What are some of the areas that are easy for you? What are some of the areas that you feel like, if this thing is a progression, that you're still aiming for 1% out of 100?
Mm.
And maybe we can refer to the Sermon on the Mount here. The big three that I remember are murder, adultery, and vows, or in the more practical standpoint, anger, compulsive desire, or um, uh, uh, verbal inauthenticity.
Sure.
Or maybe it's just simply choosing to love your enemies, or bless the people that are currently cursing you.
Hmm. Typically, like if I were to think of an enemy, it's
Hmm.
typically not someone who has caused an offense to me. The people I have the most animosity towards are typically people who transgress against people I know or am aware of, right?
Hmm.
So someone who takes advantage of the vulnerable, someone who, um, yeah, abuses someone, who's marginalized. That's
Hmm.
like where I feel that, like, uh, starting to view someone as an enemy